Welcome to Pop.0 with Bryan, Chaffin, and John Kheit.
Today is Wednesday, December 13th, 2017, and this is a video podcast for the Mac Observer. My name is Bryan Chaffin. I'm the editor-in-chief for TMO, and it's good to be here today.
And I am John Kheit, and I am so emotional, Bryan.
Why are you emotional, John?
1.5-ish reasons. One, there's a great, if you're in the market for a high capacity scanner, high volume scanner, high speed scanner, not like this is scanners like 10 times the speed of a Fujitsu ScanSnap, which is probably the best rated scanner for Macs. There's a site I'll link to called scantastic.com, and they have a great holiday sale. I have nothing to do with them other than I bought a Panasonic KV55076H scanner, which does 200 images per minute and does like tabloid size scans and everything, which is life-changing, like in a positive way, because it takes like reams of paper and just sucks them in. It could do all kinds of different paper stock. And what I've been doing,
it's life-changing if you've got a lot of things to scan.
Well,
what you do in your profession, but
I do.
Like, I don't. Wouldn't be life-changing for me.
So here's where it's life-changing. I'm getting rid of my condo in New Jersey, and I'm moving out a lot of paperwork and stuff that I had in there. But this is like old personal financial statements and stuff. Like, it's just wasting space. So just scanning ginormous bulks of these documents is great, because now it's all searchable because it OCRs it and whatnot. But the other thing that's kind of cool is I've had, and apparently my mom had for a long time, you know, you don't throw away every Christmas card or birthday card because some of them just seem so nice, but they're kind of just dead space. So I've been scanning in all these cards, like a lifetime worth of cards.
Oh, that's lovely. That's really lovely, John.
It is a profound head trip to see people giving you a birthday card for your 25th birthday, your 35th birthday, your 45th birthday, all kinds of major milestones. I've been to weddings that I've forgotten. I've gotten thank you notes for things that I've forgotten I've done. And it is the closest I've ever experienced to having what people claim is, you know, your life passing before your eyes before like some tragedy falls.
Sure.
Going through these, because you just, it's for me, seeing those cards was more potent than looking at photos, which is surprising. Like, I look at photos in photos.com, photos.app, and I don't get that pull like when you get an aroma, or you go back to an old house that you lived in and you kind of get that visceral thing, or when you hear a song from your youth. This was a stronger nostalgia than I think I've ever experienced in that regard. So it was pretty cool. So twisted way to say, it's a great deal on scanners for those high volume scanners, because you can do all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And these scanners are all like 200 pages per minute, 180 pages per minute, so like 10 times the speed of a Fujitsu scan. They're pricey. Like you could get a pretty good one for $2,000-ish that are normally, and they're rarely on sale, is why I mention it, because most of these things are kind of bought by businesses, so they just don't go on scale.
Right.
It's kind of a rare occurrence if you're looking to get the Ferrari of scanners.
All right, can I do my own show and tell?
Sure.
So I got a money clip from
oh, look at that.
From someone. It's like this lovely silver money clip that, you know, holding singles, because, you know, Bryan, but it's from Tiffany and Company.
That is sexy stuff. It almost looks like an alien artifact.
Well, I think they say it's bean shaped, but it looks kind of like a, you know, like some molten silver.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Right. And it's I love silver. I've got, you know, a few silver bars because you know, Bryan bracket. And anyway, I got this as an early Christmas present today, like actually just moments before you and I started chatting on the pre-show today.
Yeah, that's just a sexy object. It looks like
Thank you.
one of those. It's like almost sensuous to touch kind of object.
It is. It's ergonomic. So the back is, it's it's basically perfect for your thumb to hold on to it. And it replaces. I've used the money clip for a while. I had this Mont Blanc, which is really, really well built. It's lasted. Money clips tend to break, because cheap money clips in particular tend to break because you're putting pressure on them, and metal breaks after a while, right? And especially when it's cheap. So this Mont Blanc one I've been using for a long time has been fantastic, but it's like massively, it's just all beat up. This used to be smooth and pretty. So anyway, someone very close to me noticed and sent me that silver one. So I'm all stoked. I'm all excited. Like I said seconds ago, I ordered this, opened this up minutes ago.
Here with the sugar something.
Yeah, sugar mama.
Good for you.
We'll call it like it is. Yeah, sugar mama.
Very nice and very thoughtful gift. So
yeah, thank you very much.
So dude,
I can't wait for her to open my thoughtful gift, because I think I'm going to win this one.
Oh, okay, that's nice. I look forward to your reported response.
Thank you very much, John. You're very kind.
In the holiday season, the gift giving.
You know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to turn on my studio lights.
Okay.
I forgot. Your sexy mood lighting always like
sexy mood. Yeah, well,
makes me
sexiest mood lighting for me is pitch black, man. Maybe some drugs on the part of the other party. While you do that, I
did it already, so there's not much change.
Handsome man. So as always, Brian, we have in this case 4 topics, and we're lying. Today's show, we will chat about Apple security blowing, the iMac Pro, in my opinion, blowing, China and Marco Rubio, a little bit more political than we normally are on this show, and lastly, Apple's acquisition. You did a nice article on the 2 new TV execs that Apple's brought on and what that means.
Yeah, it's more like the implications of that I'm hoping.
So
I'm hoping it means.
Yeah, I like your theory on it. So I think it's I look forward to you kind of expounding on that. But first, let's start with what I'm calling the Apple KRACK debacle.
The Apple KRACK debacle. Now, you be spelling that K-R-A-C-K.
That's right. I wrote a somewhat ranty article, although
somewhat.
That's somewhat redundant for anything I write.
Somewhat, like, for instance, right now, I somewhat have a hat on.
Exactly.
It was somewhat of a rant.
Exactly.
And I somewhat have a hat band that's got a little bit, it's somewhat flashy.
Although on a relative scale of me, this is low on the rant scale, but for most people, I guess it's probably
fair enough.
It's as many things in life. Relative. So for those that don't remember, KRACK was a Wi-Fi exploit. It may be the biggest Wi-Fi exploit of all time that's actually something that is a real vulnerability out in the wild that you may experience. Basically, every Wi-Fi enabled device, client, and router was vulnerable when this came out. And here's the debacle part. So there was no shame in it, unlike Apple's shame in not putting a root password in in High Sierra and not fixing that for 73 days, shipping an operating system with no root password and full super user access for 73 days, which there is a lot of shame of. There was no shame if you were a manufacturer that was hit with this bug, because everybody was hit with this bug. The shame for Apple, and this is to me a worryful trend, or just at the very least a worryful incident. The shame is that, Apple allowed a misrepresentation about its AirPort routers to permeate. Basically, most manufacturers, the day that exploit hit, the KRACK exploit, said, hey, yes, our router is vulnerable. We plan to release a patch. A couple of them had a day 1 patch, which was incredible and awesome. I think Synology was one of them. But most, took a week or 2 to get a patch out. Apple made a statement to iMore, issued a statement that says, hey, we're patching our clients. iMore furthered that narrative saying that we don't think that Apple's routers are vulnerable, and Apple didn't comment on it, that they were vulnerable. And so everyone that has an Apple router thought that they were safe. They let this misrepresentation just quietly sit there. And what's worse is they took 57 days. Yesterday, they issued a patch. They took 57 days to fix the crack patch, which is a fail. I mean, like the schlockiest, companies putting out Wi-Fi routers fixed this orders of magnitude faster than Apple did. There's no excuse just in and of itself that it took 57 days. But adding insult to that injury is, I've talked to some people that we respect that are major IT professionals, networking professionals, and their view is basically Apple outright lied. This is a lie of omission, is the view that some people have. They outright lied, letting people think that their routers were secure and invulnerable to this when they weren't. And it's pretty crazy. So let me stop there and ask, what do you think of that? Kind of how this went down with.
I'm dumbfounded. I mean, honestly, I've been the sort of devil's advocate to your devil's advocate position about things being wrong at Apple, and I've had my faith shaken by first the root access flaw, the root access flaw existing, the root access flaw being fixed, the root access flaw then being reintroduced. I mean, come on! Oh my God! I mean, that shook my faith. Like, the iMessage bugs, the autocorrect bugs that Apple was experiencing at the same time. I mean, whatever. Like that's the kind of stuff that happened. But it sort of came at a bad time, in that it was happening with the same time as the root access flaw, and then allowing us to believe that this crack exploit was not, that the airport routers weren't subject to that, and taking 57 days to fix it is, I mean, is it incompetence? Is it neglect? Is it, I mean, seriously, is it criminal?
So I outlined one on a podcast, not to be mentioned or disparaged. Actually, I'll give credit. TDO, John Monterello, I think Kelly, and Jeff did a daily podcast on this, which I was.
This is Timo Daily Observations. That was a Wednesday show, and then John Martellaro and Jeff and I talked about it some yesterday. Because
there were so many apologies and rationalizations and excuses, I almost lost I just almost lost my shit on it. On the other hand, I have to give credit to Jeff and John and Kelly, because nobody is talking about this. Somehow the tech,
besides us,
they're like, so what if Apple lied about a major security issue? Dude, the only thing that makes this, the fact that they had the root fucking disaster security snafu, and 73 days of having root access available to everybody on that had the operating system, is the only thing that eclipses what is, I think, the second greatest security botch in the history of fucking commercial computing, which is saying something. Because one, this wasn't fixed for fucking 57 days?
57 days, yeah.
But the potential misrepresentation is even more horrible. Meaning, if Apple just came out and said, you know what, we don't give a shit about your airport router, it's vulnerable and we don't plan to fix it, it would have done more service to its customers than just letting them believe that there's nothing wrong. Because at least I could have thrown out the Apple router and bought one that would get secured.
Right. I
would have known what to do. So this is just horrendous. And so the rationalizations that I hear for this, I mean, I feel like I'm in some bizarro world skit. where people have lost their fucking mind. Why are you searching for an excuse for Apple when this is not acceptable behavior? If this were Eero, we would be holding their feet to the fire. And
if this was Microsoft or Google, we would be crowing from well, we are crowing. I mean, or not crowing, but we'd be screaming. Yeah. Everybody would be screaming, not just us, not just you and me and then Dave Hamilton.
Yeah, so it's kind of this major thing, and the argument was, well, maybe they didn't have a dude working there anymore because they're getting rid of this. One, they're still selling this piece of shit, so that's an issue.
Yeah, they're still responsible for it, and they shouldn't have shut down that section anyway.
But and I agree with that. But here's kind of the argument: you've got a utility company, and they provide your gas line and your electricity, like PSE&G might, right? And so the argument is like, PSE&G doesn't care about gas as much as they used to because they make so much more money on electricity. So they get information that, hey, dude, one of your gas mains is fucking cracked and gas is leaking out. And the answer is, we kind of let go of Joe, who used to be in charge of that. And we asked Phil, and Phil says, it's probably all right. And then it fucking blew up like crazy. But you know what? Since Phil said it was all right, it's all okay. Because there was an incompetent dude that didn't know. That makes this all acceptable. I can't understand fucking making this rationalization. Are you fucking kidding me? This is just insane. And I'll tell you how bad this is. You and I had something in common. We always say, like, look, if there's one company that I'm going to trust with my personal information, my health information, I don't trust Alexa or fucking Google Home or whatever, because it's basically, you're paying to be wiretapped by these assholes. If there's one company I trust with this kind of privacy and security stuff, is Apple, because they've always done this great job. But this shakes me to the point that I'm like, I don't know that I want to give it to these people, because the way you look at this, either it's gross fucking incompetence and miscommunication, or it's just blithe incompetence.
Yep. I agree, man. And I don't understand it, John. I don't understand it. This stuff isn't, this isn't rocket science here. And this is stuff also that Apple has historically been very, very good at. For years, Apple was Johnny on the spot with patches and dealing with the security community. And, they invested by hiring several top people, and those people, it seems like they've left.
Yeah, and so one of the things I advocated is what they need to do potentially, or one thing they should look into doing, is get a senior VP position, like on the same level as Phil Schiller and whatnot, and it should be like a VP of quality of assurance and security, because you went down the rigmarole of they patched it, then they fucking broke it, then they patched it again, and it was the same thing with the IA box bug, right? And then the IT bug right afterwards. It just shows a lack of care and quality control. And it's the kind of shit that would never have flown. This is the kind of thing that Steve Jobs had a really good exacting eye towards in getting fixed most of the time. Everyone makes bugs, and to your point, but the point is, it's just bad. And it just is so, this is important stuff. Think about this. The router is your pipe to the outside world. It is your everything pipe, right, for the home. And so some people was like, well, Apple fixed the clients, and if you fix the clients, then the clients are no longer vulnerable, so you don't really need to fix the router. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? Dude, it's a router for the home. All right, you got 2 or 3 Apple devices, but you might have 6 or 7 non-Apple devices. They're not patched. Are you fucking kidding me that it's somehow acceptable because, well, your iPad was patched and your fucking MacBook was patched, but everything else in the house is vulnerable to this? Is insane argument.
Right. And for those who only have an Apple household, you probably do have device. Almost every house is going to have something that's not an Apple device that's on the Wi-Fi network, be it your cable box or your any smart home devices, a gaming box,
device.
So, but even if that's not the case, and you're Apple only, that's the exception, not the norm.
Well, and still, even if it's the case, the customer should know this is an insecure device and has a problem. Even if even if it's minimized, there's no reason for them not to communicate this clearly. Every other, even schlocky Wi-Fi manufacturer clearly said, we're affected, we're on a patch. That's all they had to do. Actually, even if they said, we're not making any more of these, we're not going to patch it, but we're affected. Some of the most insane arguments, even people trying to rationalize the root login thing. They're like, well, you needed to have physical access. So once you have physical access, everything is gone. I'm like, really? Why don't you go fucking tell the FBI, hey, dudes, you've got physical access to all these phones, so clearly it's easy to get into. Are you fucking kidding me? That's the... I mean, we're talking with brain damaged level human beings making art.
They're not brain damaged. They're just it's a lack of understanding and even a desire to I mean, like, do not forget. Hold on, dude. I don't want to level ad hominem attacks like that. At least not in this case. I'm happy to do it other times, right? I mean, people can rationalizations happen not because people are brain damaged.
I think you're misinterpreting this as me piling on Kelly and John, and I'm not, because
no, not just them.
Because I think they, I disagree with their arguments, but they may have been.
I disagree with their arguments too, for the record.
I'm talking about the one that, hey, it's okay to have a root password breach because you still need physical access, which, by the way, isn't true. If you had remote services turned on, anyone remotely could have logged in as root. So one, it's not true, but two, even if it were true, that
it's just wrong.
Incredible thing, and the rationalizing of that is, in my opinion, it's just it's a faulty brain that's either incredibly biased and apologist brain, or a faulty brain that's advancing that issue. It's befuddling to me how any reasonable, rational human being is saying, yeah, that's a reasonable argument and excuse for it. So anyway, I think what's happening here, Brian, is that it's such a shock, it's such a potentially dishonest breach of security that people are stunned and stupefied by it, which I could kind of understand. It's almost like when you're hit with some violent shock or something, you just don't have your wits about you yet because you can't process it fully, because it's such an incredible shit show that you need to digest some of it. But dude, no one is talking about this. No one is talking about it. It's a big like, so what? So what that your router was freaking vulnerable and Apple didn't tell you? And actually, if anything, they hid the ball on this. Because I'm going to love that would be a policy. The fact that they could potentially get away with this really worries me, that no one's going to hold. I mean, next time, what are they going to do? Upload your data to a Chinese hacker site or a Russian hacker site somewhere and just say, so what, we gave away your information.
Yep. Yeah, it's hard to understand, man. I think that's why we're compelled to talk about this so much, is because we don't understand it. We don't understand how this could happen. I think if we did understand how it could happen, we wouldn't need to revisit this stuff so much.
Well, this isn't revisiting. This is new. I'm not.
Well, the crack thing is new, but the root access flaw is still hard to fathom. Still impossible to fathom.
Yeah, and Apple felt, by the way, they kind of in some weird way got away with it, because they don't feel like, oh, well, here's what we're doing to fix this. Here's how this happened. They feel no pressure at all. Like the industry, it's amazing what the tech press is so bad. It's so bad that like shit that is serious and really matters and affects people, it's not interesting, apparently. Just not interesting. That the greatest security hole in commercial computing is just like, all right, I guess we don't give a shit how it happened, why it happened. It'd be like, like a nuclear explosion somewhere, and like, the person's like, fuck it. We don't think it'll happen again. So no,
people die every day.
Yeah, people fucking die. More people die on the roads than at 3 Mile Island. So who gives a fuck? It's just, it's befuddling to me. Befuddling.
Yeah, it is befuddling, and I want Apple's feet held to the fire so that this changes. And I also want, we talked about this a little bit. I can't remember if you and I talked about this last week, but Jeff and I briefly mentioned that we'd like to see more from Apple. We'd like to see an explanation from Apple and some kind of profound apology for having let this happen and assurances that this is never going to happen again.
I agree. I agree with you guys on that.
I want to be reassured here. I want Daddy to reassure me. I want Daddy Cook to reassure me that everything's going to be okay and that these dark times will pass.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many just fucked up news from Apple that I'm telling you, more seriously than ever, I'm thinking like I'm just gonna look into some Linux boxes and
no way, dude. No way. So it's funny you should say that.
Yeah, it's not that bad yet, but dude, if they shake me enough on the security shit continuously, I'm pulling the eject.
So it's funny because we got an unrelated email into Daily Observations from a guy saying that he's essentially done, and you know how cranky and upset he is. And then we also had someone in we have a Facebook group for the Apple Context Machine. I'll give a plug. It's facebook.com/groups/context machine. You join us and talk with Jeff and I about topics that we talk about on the show. And we had someone who asked us a question: what would it take for you to stop using Apple products? And I'm nowhere close to that. Is as miserable as these last couple of weeks have been in terms of security. It's Apple products as a whole are still far and away better than everybody else. I'm certainly not going to Android, where I'm the product.
Oh, no.
And I don't like I don't like the Windows interface philosophy. And the last thing I want to do is be part of the experiment with Linux. That's just me.
Yeah, I mean, whatever. Different people are going to have different thresholds, but this is a nice segue into our next topic of what is the threshold for professionals being ass fucked relentlessly by Apple's shitty product that they put out for a Pro that are non-expandable, i.e. The new iMac Pro. So that's a little preview into what my thoughts are. But what are your thoughts?
I have two thoughts. One of them is actually positive. The machine itself, the specs on this thing and the cost, what you get for the cost, are excellent.
Oh, you know what that reminds me of?
What's that?
That reminds me of the same comments made when the Trash Can Mac came out. And that was a roaring success. Because the time, bang for buck, for the stuff you got is kind of not right deal. Yeah, that worked out great.
Yeah, it did work out great. That's fine. It's a fair point, and we'll see what happens. The fact that it's sealed now, okay, there's a couple things we don't know, John.
True. And, you know, fingers crossed, hoping against hope, even though I'm pretty much psychologically prepared to be vastly disappointed. I
yes.
think we're going, and I got my fingers crossed. Go ahead.
All right. So we don't know if RAM and SSD are soldered onto the motherboard.
And if anything, whatchamacallit, one of our listeners sent me an email, Rick, saying that there's actually a chance that that the RAM is not soldered in because the X-ray images that you see of those have showed that the RAM is on SIM cards.
Great. So all we have to do is split the case to upgrade the RAM. That's ridiculous as can be, but better than the RAM being soldered in. And the same thing goes for the hard drive, and unless of course there's an extra hard drive bay in there where, again, if you split the case, you can add some kind of additional storage. If they're soldered in only, then this is just, I mean, if that's the case, John, here's the deal, man. Okay, I watched the video for changing out my hard drive on my iMac 5K late 2015.
Right. And
you have to split the case to change the hard drive, but there's actually plenty of room in there.
There's a ton of room in there. We've upgraded, and by the way, what's on the screen is the X-ray or delidded back version of the new iMac Pro, which I'll show in a second. But yeah, Walt and I did it for, I think it was a 2011 version of the iMac, which wasn't bad to take off. But the fear is, I'm not sure if it's true and when it started, but I believe some of the iMacs might use glue. And once you have glue, like no mere mortal is going to take this apart and put it back together. And by the way, you know what people love to do? I love that people are always banding about like $4,000 or $5,000 for this machine. This machine is not $5,000 because, you know, John Martellero suggested that you just max this machine out day one, right? Because you might need 128 gigs of RAM. So fuck it, pay $2 or $3 grand for that. And you might need 4 terabytes of storage. So fuck it, max that out for another 2 or 3 grand more. So once we add those bad boys onto, and look, what are you going to get? You got to get at least a 10-core version of this, right? So this is probably like a 12 grand machine.
Yeah.
So nothing you like to do more than crack the case and give up the warranty on a 12K machine.
Yeah, 10 or 12K, or really even on a 5K machine.
A 5K machine, because yeah, I love to do that. I just crack the case and yeah, fuck this warranty.
But if it's worse, John, if it's soldered in, I don't understand. It's because it's just not necessary. There's room back there. There's room back there for this stuff. There's room on mine. All I need on my machine to not have to crack the case is a freaking access port. So give me a door on the back case, and I could actually change out my hard drive. It's not that. I mean, the actual change isn't that difficult. It's the cracking of the case that's the problem.
It is, and what's interesting is the 27-inch. You have the 27-inch, so it should have a door for the RAM upgrade, right?
It does have a door for the RAM upgrade, yeah.
So here's interesting. So this is the back of the new iMac Pro, right? Kind of see-through, and you could see that it clearly has. In this case, these are the RAM sticks, the SIM card. I don't know what they're called anymore, but that's basically the RAM sticks fit into these slots. So there's slots for them. Excellent. What's not clear is and there doesn't seem to be any visual of this. So the only place it could, potentially hide is maybe behind the panel.
You're talking about the hard drive, the
SSD. Is it soldered in, or is it on a PCIe type stick? And what we pray is that it's on a stick, because if you can't upgrade this, I disagree vehemently with John Martellero on this. It's a tragedy, and you've learned this firsthand, of not having an upgradable drive that's easy on this card. So let's go into the practical reality. He said just get an external drive. Like that's usually the argument. By the way, another successful argument that was used to support the trash can Mac, which resulted in Apple's the most probably humiliating press conference of failure of product design that Apple has ever experienced, maybe outside of AntennaGate, was because of what a shit show the Mac Pro was. But these arguments were like, well, just throw. And by the way, the Mac Pro, the trash can Mac Pro, the 2013 one, is a model of expandability compared to this iMac, because at least you could easily throw in a new SSD. There was a slot for it and RAM upgrades on it. So those were failed arguments. People had these rat's nest of cables and whatnot. But here's why that doesn't work for this machine. This machine comes with an SSD that's 3 gigabytes per second, which is awesome performance. It's got to be like one of the fastest SSDs out there, period. Outside of 6 gigabyte per second ones you can still get from my 2010 Mac Pro, by the way, through a PCIe card. But you got 3 gigabytes per second. So let's try and replicate that externally. So here's the issue. If you get a Thunderbolt case, the Thunderbolt cases take what, Brian? They take 2.5-inch SSDs that have what? A SATA connector. And what are the SATA connectors limited to in throughput? 500 megabytes per second. So you're clearly not going to get an external to run this new $5,000 machine that can do 3 gigabytes per second and run it on a 500 megabyte per second bus limited there.
Well, you could, but it would be like shooting, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot.
Because all professionals want to do that, Brian. Brian, all professionals want to fucking get the $5,000 system and then have an ugly brick on it and then run it at, 1/6 the speed. That's what all professionals want to do when they spend their money. And so what do you have to do? The PCIe sticks, the only connectors you can get for the PCIe sticks, which do around 1 to 2 gigabytes per second, that you can get, go through what kind of interface? USB 3. What's USB 3 limited to? 500 megabytes per second.
Yeah, I'm surprised there aren't some Thunderbolt in cases that support the sticks.
And yet this is not theoretical, because you yourself have been looking for an upgrade and found that that is your problem, right?
Yep.
And here's the reality: to get 3 gigabytes per second.
Wait, hold on. Wouldn't a normal PCI chassis Thunderbolt support the sticks?
Maybe you can get a PCI box literally that takes PCI slots, and then
yes,
PCI card that takes one of these things. And yes, so that's one thing. But even then, you're going to have to probably raid three PCI slots to get the 3 gigabytes per second with current tech.
Yeah, right.
Because everybody wants to have a big freaking cage off the back of their all-in-fucking one computer.
Right.
Because that's what you do with an all-in-one computer. You want to have fucking rat's nests of shit off of it. That's what professionals do, Brian. They're like, I want an all-in-one, but I want to have a fucking rat's nest associated with it. It's even more profoundly fucking stupid than it was.
Well, I have an actual rat. My desk is an actual rat's nest, not just of cables.
Well, you know, by going this route, you could add to the
I could add to the fun, yeah.
Livable space for the rats. So anyway, so to get reasonably, what people will do, they'll get, like, you know, they'd have to get a 6-bay like Synology box-ish, RAID-ish thing with Thunderbolt, and then put in 6 SATA drives, RAID them to get the 3 gigabyte per second performance that you get on the internal drive. Not to mention, Brian, you know what professionals love to do? They love to have their Photos library and all their shit on external drives, because, you know, Photos app works awesome when you maintain the library on external drives. There's never a problem, ever. Fuck you if you say it. Fuck you, it never happens. And, you know, and maintaining shit on external drives that are system bound, that work way better system bound, is what professionals love to do, because they're like, fuck, I'm such a pro. I got nothing but time to fucking, you know, debug all kinds of shit in my life. That's what I like to do. And by the way, it's one thing to upgrade to fucking 16 gigs of fucking RAM on their piece of shit laptop, MacBook Pro. It's another thing to spend an extra $4 fucking grand to $5 to max out to 128 gig. And even then, you know why that's a fucking stupid argument? Why it's a fucking monumental, giant turd fucking argument to say, well, just get more when you buy it. Other than the fucking Marie Antoinette, let them eat fucking cake if you're poor and can't afford this shit. Here's the thing. You know how much RAM my machines had in it? This is a 2010 Mac Pro. 128 gigs of RAM. You know that when it originally came out, it was not capable, or at least not listed as being capable of doing 120 gigs of RAM. This is what happens after you buy shit. Technology keeps rolling, and the density of chips and storage go up. So,
and six gig SSDs were not available.
Right.
When I got my iMac, for instance.
So a year later, when new tech comes out, if you can't upgrade the RAM, you can't upgrade the hard drive. There's no reason why it might not be able to take 256 gig, but if it were soldered in, you'd have a big fucking problem. So these arguments are beyond lame, but to your point, here's the best case scenario, right? This is what a best case scenario, and if this happens, I think it's workable, and my rant is for naught. I think 3 things have to happen, and I think we may know one of the 3 is actually positive, which Rick provided. So Rick showed us that yes, these the SIMs for the RAM are available, and it's probably user upgradable. It could have changed since, you know, that photo, but it's likely there. Item number 2 is the SSD cannot be soldered in. If it's soldered in, it's a shit show. It means this is not expandable, and this is a bullshit. It's not a pro machine. This is literally spitting in the face of pros after they've bitched and started going away from Apple, just saying, fuck you, we don't give a fuck about you. And the third thing is the case has to be removable in a way where it's not glued down. If it's glued down, this is all over. No normal human being or even normal professional is going to bother with this. But if it's kind of a case where, yeah, you got to get the suction plug to pull the screen, but it comes out where a reasonable human being could detach the case and get in there, it will be workable.
Yeah, it'll be workable for sure. And again, the machine itself is pretty nifty.
Yeah, the current performance level is, but again, that was the same argument held for
well, yeah. Hold on. That became irrelevant as the Mac Pro turned a year, and then 2 years, and then like 3 years, right? But we're not there. We can't bitch about that yet because we're not there yet.
Well, I can't bitch about everything. So don't dare restrict. What do you think?
My apologies, sir. I did you wrong.
So we don't know that, and hopefully iFixit will get one tomorrow or something and tear it down, and we'll confirm one way or the other. But I have a solution for Apple. Stop with. They need to grow their mind. Right? This is for Apple. All you fucking fuck up, sit the fuck down and take a lesson. When Steve came back, he simplified things, and there was consumer and pro and portable and desktop. Clearly, Apple has been frustrated by things like when it first came out, the MacBook Air. It didn't fit anywhere there, but it was cool and small and neat. They clearly have a different category that's not just consumer and not just pro. Pro is, you need expandable shit. Every time they produce anything that fucking has pro and doesn't have expandable RAM and hard drive in it, is basically them just shoving their dick on the table and saying, everyone kiss my dick all day long and marvel at it, at what an obnoxious asshole I am, because it is not pro. But what they do have is something that I before I called kind of an executive device. An executive loves the new MacBook Pro. It's thin and sexy, and it's got plenty of power, at least initially, and they don't give a fuck about upgrading it or whatever, because they're not pros. They're executives. They like cool shit. And it's fine for their non-pro mild use. It might be prosumer use or whatever like that. So they have a great marketing trademark currently with the Apple Watch Edition that really lends itself to this kind of executive branch. And they should have that. They should have a consumer device, a real pro device, which means motherfucker, the RAM and the fucking storage device have to be fucking upgradable. And by the way, you're right. If you've got this little bay door to upgrade the RAM SIMs, you could easily have place the PCIe blade to be right near it to make that user upgradable too. But the pro stuff should be pro stuff. But then you have this cool, if they just made this the iMac edition, no one would be bitching. The pros wouldn't be like, fuck you, you're totally putting your balls in my face. They'd be like, yeah, that's not for me, but it's a cool thing for execs or whatever.
You got a great point. If they called this the iMac edition, there would be nowhere near the amount of angst and anguish over this.
But think about it. It also works for the plain MacBook and the old MacBook Air when it first came out. It didn't fit in that grid as well as the Pro and the consumer, right? Because it was more expensive than the consumer. In some cases, when it first came out, it was actually more expensive than even a Pro MacBook. But it wasn't a Pro machine by any stretch. Like, no Pro wanted to use that. But it was sexy. So it was an edition. It was like an executive edition thing. So they have a great high-end brand that they're building. They really should look to add a new segment that they've always had difficulty marketing. Like, it didn't fit in that two-tier grid of consumer and pro. Make it consumer, pro, and edition. And no one would have given a fuck about this. Yes, it makes sense that the edition version of this, everything is soldered on, and fuck you if you don't like it. If you don't, it's kind of like saying, no one's complaining that the Apple Watch, when it first came out, that the edition was $12,000 because it was made out of gold and it had the same functionality. They understood this is for rich fucks that want to show off. Of course, they don't give a fuck that it's got this issue with it. And it would be the exact same thing. So they really need to expand this. And it's kind of shocking that they haven't come to this conclusion. This thing is, you know, it answers itself. This is not a pro machine. This is an insult to pro machines, particularly if the SSD is soldered on this thing. And or it's glued so you can't get to any of these upgrades. It's not pro. Just there's no reasonable way to do that. There's unreasonable arguments, many unreasonable arguments that baffle the mind, apologizing that this somehow is a pro machine, but it's not. It is an addition then, and a nice addition at that.
It is an addition. Yep. And as it's funny, as you said that, it just became a lot sexier in my mind.
Yeah.
Funny how that works, huh? All right. Dead horse afoot.
China versus Rubio.
Yeah. So what did Mr. Rubio say? I didn't actually see this yet.
Let me play it because we can.
So Marco Rubio is a senator from Florida, Republican senator from Florida, former presidential campaign presidential candidate, and in my humble opinion, general fucking tool.
So this is one of the rare exceptions where politically we're actually on the same page. He's not amongst my favorite people. I'll leave it at that, right? try not to go down the rabbit hole of politics. He's not amongst my favorite people. But in this, it's kind of like both you and I. Well, I won't speak for you. I fucking loathe Ajit from the FCC, right? I fucking loathe him.
I cannot stand him.
And I wonder if you're coming around
then
to my supposition that he
large market.
To my supposition that he's a stupid human being, which I asserted a while ago, and you weren't fully on board with. I wonder if you're going to come around to that at some point.
Maybe. I don't, dude. It's hard. We don't have enough evidence. But it's hard to fathom. He's either a liar or he's stupid. Two of the two.
We're in a rat hole within a rat hole. So let me
all right, yeah.
Up here and let me play what he says.
We're talking about. By the way, we were talking about FCC Chairman Ajit Pai, the man who is intent on destroying net neutrality.
So just confirm that you can hear this, Bryan.
Then we have the issue of access, large market that people are dying for. And so, again, this is where you come into this absurd situation where the World Internet Conference is held in China, meant to promote China's vision of cyber sovereignty, which all of you have talked about. Basically, the idea that governments all over the world should have the right to control what appears on the internet in their countries. The most confusing part of it all is that Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, stood up at that conference and he celebrated China's vision of an open internet.
Not sure.
He delivered the keynote speech on the opening day of that gathering. He wasn't there alone, by the way. He was joined by, some of the other attendees from Google and Cisco. But the most ironic part about it is that in a written response to questions to our colleagues, Senator Leahy and Senator Cruz, back in June, or earlier this year, I'm not remember the month, maybe it was back in November, Apple admitted that it had removed 674 VPN apps from its app store in China. These are tools that allow users, of course, to circumvent censorship by routing traffic through other countries. And to comply with what they said they were complying with local law, Skype was also removed from Apple's China store, as was reported by the New York Times. So again, here's an example of a company, in my view, so desperate to have access to the Chinese marketplace, they're willing to follow the laws of that country, even if those laws run counter to what the company's own standards are supposed to be.
I think that's a good point.
And a good example for the United States and for our people, how some of these individuals who like to come here and lecture us about free speech and human rights and domestic problems then go abroad and are fully cooperative on some grotesque violation of human rights because there's a lot of money to be made and they don't want to offend their host country.
So exit from that. And hearing it fresh, do you want a minute to gather your thoughts? I could give mine or
sure. Why don't you start? I'm good to go, really, but start.
So, like I said, I'm generally not a fan of his, and I think it was an unfair characterization of what Tim Cook went there to some extent. But I could see, on the other hand, it's a fair characterization that some people that are really into human rights see it. It's like you either kowtowing to this or you're not. Tim Cook's position roughly was, look, you can either be outside the system and have zero influence on it, or you could be within the system and have some influence to try to affect positive change. And I think, fair-minded people have legitimate views on both sides of that. Some people say, no, you're lying to yourself. You're not really affecting change. China has not changed. If anything, they've doubled down on their bad behavior, and really you're just using that as an excuse in the meantime to milk that market for money. And but I think Tim Cook's view, I don't know if it's sincere in his heart, but it's not an unreasonable view, and it's one of those things. It's certainly worth a college try to see, is there any movement? At a certain point, I think that becomes untenable, but I don't think that we've gotten to that point where it's clear cut that he should just not engage with that market. Let me stop there and see what are your thoughts on it.
First of all, do we have any power to kick out bots out of our chat? Hate bots.
I don't know. It's a good question. Let me see.
Boy, I hate bots. God, I hate spammers. Just hate these people. Just hate these people, man. Just absolute vile, loathing. So, all right. So here's the deal. Mr. Rubio is not wrong. He may have presented it in its maximum unflattering language, but he's not wrong. And the thing is that Tim Cook's not wrong either. So let's go back. All right, let's go back. Do you remember Google and
Bryan, you say the last 7 seconds over again. You cut out.
Sorry about that. So let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to when Google and Microsoft were told to comply with the Great Firewall of China and censor search results.
Yep. In
China. Microsoft said, "You betcha," and Google said, "Nope," and they closed up shop.
Times I have to say I'm so not just proud isn't probably the right word.
I'm proud. I'm grateful and proud.
So much courage for Google to do that. I give them so much credit. They literally gave up probably doubling their revenue within a reasonable amount of years over that stance. And it took, everyone rightly mocks, in my opinion, Phil Schiller's like, it took courage to get rid of the port on the fucking iPhone. No. What Google did there and saying, fuck you, China, that took courage.
Right. And so what they ended up doing is
they don't get enough credit for that.
They closed up shop in China and redirected all China domain searches to the Hong Kong domain, which, I've always wondered how long could that possibly last? Right? Whatever. Rabbit hole. So Apple has been essentially presented with the same kinds of circumstances. Apple has been told to comply with local law, which is what Google and Microsoft were told to do, or there will be repercussions. And those repercussions could be everything from Apple being kicked out of China to Apple being kicked out of China. And what do you do? I mean, what the hell do you do? I mean, so if Apple pulls out of China, what that does is it gives Chinese tech companies free reign to first of all, rip Apple off with impunity, even more impunity, and B, freedom to compete and excel without facing any Western competition, and which is what China wants. But at the same time, I've
last part, but keep going.
What's that?
I disagree with your last point that's what they want, but keep going.
Oh, I think the current regime's entire goal is to promote local Chinese tech companies to be able to go so that they can eventually go toe to toe with Western tech companies. I think that's why they've shifted on this protectionist stance. The previous government wanted Western technology companies to come in so that Chinese manufacturers and software developers could learn from them and rip them off. And the current guy is like, okay, we've done that. Now it's time to foster their growth so that they're global competitors.
So here's where I don't want to interrupt your point. So if you have more, but I can tell you where I disagree with that.
Please do.
So, it's probably an unfair characterization, but I'm going to say third worldish countries, or not quite first world countries, they have this kind of cult of, particularly communist ones, cult of individual look at me, show offiness. And one of the best things that people in China want to do, in Dubai want to do, is say, look at my Lamborghini. Look at my Louis Vuitton shit. Look at this high brand stuff. And when your country doesn't have access to those goods, it makes those folks feel like their country is a second-class country. And so banning top-tier goods like that, in some sense, is demeaning the country and makes it lesser than it is. If all of a sudden you can't get an Apple product, if all of a sudden you can't get a Lamborghini or Ferrari, it means like you're kind of a third world market that, you know, nobody wants to deal with. And if China makes itself so distasteful, kind of like you know, South Africa during apartheid, you're in a worse than a third world country at that point. So they can only push things so far. It's a game of chicken with a lot of these major brands that denote success in those countries, and getting rid of them is not what they want. They want to control them. They want to limit their profit and maximize their own profit. But if they get rid of them, it is a slight on themselves, as their country is. What kind of country doesn't have this kind of stuff, right? Only lame countries don't have these high rent goods. So getting rid of it is a problem. And this problem is way worse in a lot of ways, in my opinion, for Apple than it is for Google. Because yes, Google forewent, you know, potentially 100, 200% the revenue it might have gotten, which is incredible because Google, you know, prints money. But for Apple, it's worse. So let's say, you know, tomorrow, China tells Apple, we want to spy on every transaction. You have to open up everything, give us all your source code. You know, we have the keys to serve. You know, makes it just untenable. And Apple pulls shop. Okay, so they're going to lose 20, 25% revenue. Life goes on. You know, the stock will take a hit for a couple of months, and life goes on. Here's the danger for Apple. And this, by the way, gets back to my discussion of Tim Cook's bad management. He deserves to get scolded for because he's not prepared for. What happens if China says, oh yeah, you know what? Fuck you. You can't produce phones here. That's the way you're going to play? Fuck you. Can't use Foxconn. Apple can't produce its products. It doesn't produce shit. The last thing it produced in the States is the fucking trash can Mac. That's not, oh, okay, 25% less revenue, boo-hoo, life goes on. That is end of company. That is apocalypse. Now, of course, China has vested interest in that too, because that's potentially 1 million people, you know, a year that are employed by the likes of Foxconn for Apple.
More than that, because of the supply chain too, and
right.
that is a significant threat, and China would happily pull that plug if it was in its broader interest to do so.
But my point is, don't you think it would be wise for a real good manager that knows supply chain stuff to say, maybe it makes sense for us to have alternatives, and maybe that's why India is important. But how about India is going to play the exact same games as China? Yes, it's not as quite, you know, it's not as communist and oppressive a regime. But,
yeah, it's not an authoritarian regime.
But they still play a lot of those same games. So wouldn't it make sense to maybe have a roboticized plant somewhere else, if not in the U.S., but, you know, some places?
Don't you think Apple's working on that?
Dude, how many years have they been working over in China? It's
all right. So first of all, understand that when Apple started working in China, it's when China was. I'm sorry. This
should not be happening tomorrow. It should have happened yesterday. Is my point.
Well, I don't think they can't do all the stuff with robots yet, man.
Well, all right, fine. Have another plant where they control this widget. Where
yeah, they can't. There's no place on the planet to do what's being done in China.
Why do they have to do everything under one roof? They could have something that produces 3% over in this country, 6% over in that country, 2%. You don't have to solve all the problems, but the point is to
no, I agree with you, right? Diversifying manufacturing is in Apple's best interest. I actually think it's something they're working on. They've been talking about for years doing something in Brazil. I think that's eventually going to happen for a number of reasons. For one thing, Brazil's protectionist policies make that beneficial to Apple. I imagine they're going to be eventually doing something in India. And eventually I think they will end up having a, 99.999% robot staffed facility or 10 here in the States.
But even, I mean, in some sense, they have done this, right? I don't think you need to be fully roboticized. Okay, it's more expensive here, but it's still diversifying your risk. the fact is that if tomorrow China wanted to just say, we don't like you, Apple, fuck you, Apple is over.
Yes, this is true. But okay, these are rabbit holes within rabbit holes. But 100 and some odd years ago, our forefathers, and maybe not yours, I don't know if your forefathers were here yet, but people died so that American workers don't have to do what Chinese workers willingly do. Which is why Apple if Apple's going to do manufacturing in the US, it has to be entirely robot based. It's not about the expense. It's about the people and workforce flexibility, not to mention the population density to have the size of a flexible workforce that Apple needs.
Well, they already have a plant here. It's a small one, but they clearly do. And so there's clearly some people that are willing to do it.
But they're not doing iPhones. Come on, man.
That rat hole. I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're not building iPhones. They're building low volume things here.
True, but look, every journey starts with the first step, right?
Yeah, it does. I think that particular journey is underway.
All right. Well, I think we're vehemently agreeing that it is not acceptable that tomorrow China could just turn off Apple.
Correct.
Right. I don't think that is a sign of good management,
unless they're doing something about it.
But currently, that is the case.
That is currently the case. Yes.
So I knew I'd get there.
So what is the question is, what is Apple supposed to do now? Okay, there's a difference between complying with the local law, which is what Apple did with these VPN apps. I actually hate the fact that they did that. I don't know what else they could do. If they didn't do it, what happens? China comes in and forces the servers to seizes the servers.
First of all, Rubio can go suck a bag of dicks because he's so hypocritical about China controlling the internet when he's like, yeah, but when he's for Verizon controlling the internet via fucking net neutrality, that's not hypocritical at all, right?
Right.
But all right, beyond his retarded hypocrisy, this is why I think it's where all people can have a good argument and have really good intentions, and the debate is useful, right? In that, I think there's a spectrum of grayness. Like some places you have to be, it's not even, it's kind of being a good citizen, right? Because it's just not like in Germany, anything that has Nazis in it, it's part of the law and part of the culture that it's just verboten, right? No, well, anyway, it's not allowed. And so like having, Wolfenstein with Nazis in the game or something, you might not be allowed. And you're like, yeah, but that's kind of specific to that culture, and you should be cognizant of it. Whether or not it should or shouldn't be is a good debatable issue. But you're going to be in areas where, complying with the law isn't necessarily, you can't use our standards of what we value in America to dictate all. But in other places, you're just helping a regime.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the thing about Tim Cook being at this conference that makes me tense. So there's one thing between complying with the law, and it's another thing entirely to go and essentially endorse the Great Firewall of China, which is what Tim Cook essentially did by saying that he supports China's vision of an open internet, which is not a vision of an open internet at all. It's a goddamn fucking authoritarian vision of fucking being able to control your shit so your people can only fucking learn what you fucking want them to fucking learn. Right? That actually fucking pisses me off that he would fucking be at that fucking conference, because that motherfucking conference was about the goddamn country of China having the right to fuck over its people by denying access to information and controlling what they see and consume.
My God, this is an episode of Pop.0 where we body switch, because apparently I play the role of Bryan and you playing the role of
listen, man, injustice pisses me off. And what China does with the Great Firewall of China is injustice. And for Tim to even implicitly or tacitly or vaguely endorse that bullshit makes me tense. And it's he didn't have to be at that motherfucking conference, and he didn't have to motherfucking say he supported China's vision of an open internet when China doesn't have a fucking vision of a fucking goddamn open internet. So that's where I'm with Rubio.
So one, I agree with you in spirit and everything, but I will give Tim Cook, and this is why I'm surprised it's not you, because you're usually doing the proletariat tea leaf reading of Tim Cook, which is, if you listen to his speech, he's very, in my opinion, measured in what he's saying. He's like
always measured.
Good-hearted people can disagree on what open means, but we believe that things should be more open, and that's always a good thing, which is not the official position of China. But that's as far as he could go in that.
He was there. His mere presence puts the Tim Cook stamp of approval.
We're agreeing past one another vehemently. I'm just saying that you're usually more, reading his things, but it shows you that when you get pissed off enough, you're like, fuck it, I know what the gist is, and fuck him, he shouldn't be there.
No, I recognized how careful he was being. That motherfucker is always careful. I love Tim Cook. I love how precise he is with his words. It's like watching him is like, it's like watching this what's that?
Like watching paint dry?
No, it's not. It's like watching this master class puppet show where every little tiny thing is so controlled. Every word has its meaning. Every word has its place. Every word is considered. That man is a fucking genius speaker, even though he's not very charismatic about it.
Oh my God.
Okay. I recognize that with what he said in China. His mere presence, without utterly condemning censorship, puts a stamp of approval on the proceedings.
So anyway, we're vehemently agreeing past one another on this issue as well. But I do think it's a nuanced issue, and I think what the danger for Apple is, and they better get their shit together and have additional facilities for manufacturing, is it is not inconceivable. It is not even a rare potential that at some point they're going to be pushed too far by China, and the only reasonable option they're going to have is to say, we pull the product. And the fear is that China can say, well, fuck you, you're totally out, right?
Yep.
Apple has to have a plan B in place. You need to develop.
Let me add a couple of extra layers on that, because I think this is important. One is that, and I've talked to...
Right. Just to say, it's a little bit not fair to criticize Apple in the same way that we might have been critical of Google, because they have this additional problem, right? Google can put servers anywhere. Apple has got all of its production eggs currently in one basket, which is China. So that's an additional wrinkle for them.
It is an additional wrinkle, but there's a couple of elements that I think are important. I mentioned some of this several times before, but Apple is increasingly a pawn of international politics between the U.S. and China, who all large multinationals doing business in China or the U.S. are pawns by one government or the other. This is been the case since we've had modern politics, and it will continue to be the place. It happens to be Apple now because Apple is the world's most valuable company and the world's most profitable company. So that like in any given moment, China can start fucking with Apple, not because Apple is actually doing anything to be fucked with, but because Apple is a proxy. China can go after Apple and threaten Apple in order to try to get the U.S. to back off on something that the U.S. is doing. All right. Point number two is that it would be really interesting if Apple did have manufacturing facilities in, say, Brazil or the US or India or anywhere else. China would be in a completely different position. Rather than being able to threaten Apple, Apple would be able to threaten China by saying, listen, you keep fucking with us on this shit, we're going to pull our production elsewhere. So now it becomes it's a completely different situation, where China would be willing to put 1 million people out of jobs to pursue broader gains. But if it became a matter of preserving those jobs, Apple would have the power.
It's a real new. I agree with all your analysis there, spot on. And I think it's a nuanced issue, meaning it's even currently as dire as the consequence would be for Apple. It's still a game of chicken, right? Both parties lose, so there's a little bit of mutually assured destruction in there. Not obviously China wouldn't be destroyed, but they don't want to lose the jobs. It would be destruction level for Apple currently. But yeah, the more they diversify, the better their leverage is for these things. And actually,
that's true everywhere in all things.
Yeah, and potentially that actually gives them more power to actually affect positive change. Whether or not Tim Cook is sincere about that or not, I think is debatable. But anyway, I think it's a really interesting, nuanced issue. I think this is one of those areas where I don't fault either side of the political fence, because it's nuanced, it's interesting, and fair-minded folks can have very fair-minded differences of opinion on this, which I happen in this case to respect all of them. Which is, when the fuck does that happen, right?
That's a fair point.
So, but I thought it would be an interesting discussion, and it was for me at least. I really liked hearing your thoughts on that. Anyway, we probably killed that horse, but one quick, just hey Lars Boy, hey Rick, hey Ancient, and I'm glad to hear that Rick's granddaughter, who was bashing on his keyboard, is not hearing and learning.
Yes,
from us.
Yeah, we don't want her learning from us, especially in rant mode.
Right. Today was a particularly ranty show. And anyway, we're off to topic number 4, which is your topic, which is you wrote a very nice article, and you espoused an interesting theory of hope. Which
I know, right? We can actually end on an uplifting note, right? All right.
Hope.
Ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
So Apple hires 2 new television execs, right? And what's your knee-jerk reaction to that? Fuck television. Give me some fucking Macs, right?
Hold on. There was an internet thing. Just go back to say, and what your knee-jerk reaction is.
Okay.
Hiring 2 people is.
So Apple hires 2 new television execs, and they've hired some other television execs. So we'll do a story about Apple hiring television execs, and a very common and utterly understandable reaction is fuck television. Fuck, go hire some software engineers, right? Make my Macs work, make my iPhones work.
Again, okay, I'm an awful lot in this episode.
I know. Blame you. So, but what if these television execs being hired are actually a sign of the things that we actually want to be happening? What if Jamie Ehrlich and Zach Van Amberg are the 2 cats who are in charge of Apple's original programming efforts? And what if they've been given the authority, power, and money to go hire people, build their team, and do what they need to do, right? So this is something you've been on about, right? Where like Apple needs to empower more people to make decisions, to have things happen. Mm-hmm. So what if we're actually seeing some of that with these television execs, and these other people that are being hired are not so much the executive team focusing just on the TV stuff, but instead it's the executive team having hired and empowered some other executives to go do their thing? What if this is a good sign? What if this is what we want and not a sign of the problem?
Oh, Bryan, you're my darling optimist. What if this is an area that Apple doesn't give a fuck, and the area that they pretend to give a fuck is Macs and phones and stuff, and the old farts that have been failures at scaling this and actually providing an infrastructure for people to succeed never give up the reins to those things that we care about, yet still kill them off anyway? So what
kill them with neglect?
Yeah. What do you call the Mac? What do you call all this software shit, dude? It's just a total lack of care, in my opinion. Total.
Oh, John, you're my darling, not optimist. Pessimist. That's it.
I hope you're right, and I like the way you connected the dots on that, and I think it's an interesting potential. So
I hope, man. I just hope, because it's one of 2 things. It's a sign of the problem, or it's a sign that something somewhere in the company is being done the way we've been wanting it to be done from the outside.
But what's interesting about people in general is that people, for me, bring hope when particularly when they're new. You never know what a new person, if they got enough passion and drive and vision, they could push things in ways that maybe even the people that hired them didn't foresee, and in good way. And the problem is I don't see that from the current management team, and I don't have a lot of expectations for them because it's just a track record of shit, in my opinion. But I do like hope springs eternal whenever they bring someone good on. Like when they brought in that security guy a bunch of years back, he did so many
Hubbard,
so many awesome things for security, like things clearly, like they did better. When they put in, what's his name, the granddad of the iPod, I always forget his fucking name, Dinesh, dude.
Tony Fadell.
Yeah. dude got, he made shit happen, and he had a vision, and it drove him, and he changed the access of Apple. As much credit as we give to Steve Jobs, and he deserves a ton of it, this guy came into a company that knew fucking Macs and not shit otherwise, and he changed the fundamental access of this company into basically an electronics and technology and services platform ecosystem company. That's what the iPod did. It just fundamentally tilted the access of the world of Apple, period. And that was a guy that was motivated, and he got his issues like all of us human beings, and Steve and everyone, but the guy did it because he was passionate and had a good fire in his belly. So anytime you bring in new people like this, it's one of the few times that I join you in optimism that, good things can happen. There's a potential for it. There's new blood and new ideas, and someone might be able to affect things in a great way. So let's hope.
Let's hope. I do hope. And I'm personally excited that Apple's in original content, as long as it doesn't keep me from also getting good Macs and iPhones and iPads.
Oh, by the way, I missed one of my many opportunities to gloat about the wonderful nature of Apple's original content with the attack of the apps and the incredible high viewership of.
You're talking about the Planet of the Apps?
Yeah, Planet of the Apps and their karaoke shit show. Again, I never begrudged Apple from doing this. I just questioned their judgment on the shit.
Okay, fine, right? And I've been very disappointed by Carpool Karaoke.
Hey, I'm gloating. They were shit.
But Jamie Ehrlich and Zach Van Amberg were brought on afterwards.
Oh yeah, I'm not dropping this on them. I'm just saying their initial plans were shit, just like I always said they were, and I was right. That's all. Just there you go. There, yeah. Good.
One could argue that what's happening now are also part of their initial plans.
Sure, because the success.
So their initial shows were not very good.
Success they've had is just awful.
And I think here's something. I actually fear that. Part of why Carpool Karaoke is not very good on Apple Music is because Tim insisted that it be clean.
Yeah. Okay. That's the reason. But listen, who knows? Coulda, woulda, shoulda. In the end, I was right. Shit show. Anyway, did we kill all our?
Yeah, I think there's a whole herd of horses,
and they're all
strewn amongst our feet here.
All right. Well, thank you, dude. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really super interesting. I liked your thoughts on a lot. Well, I always like your thoughts, but some of them were really.
Thanks, man. Likewise, and thanks to everybody who joined us. As always, we appreciate it. And make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you're not already subscribed, please give us a subscription.
And
yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And on that popular topic, we'll see you next week.